heal as a team, we're going to crumble. Inch by inch, play by play, till we're finished. We're in hell right now, gentlemen, believe me. And we can stay here, get the shit kicked out of us, or we can fight our way back into the light. We can climb out of hell, 1 inch at a time. You know, when you get old in life, things get taken from. I mean, that's part of life. But you only learn that when you start losing stuff. You find out life's this game of inches. So is football. Because in either game, life or football, the margin for error is so small. I mean, 1/2 a step too late or too early, and you don't quite make it. 1/2 second too slow, too fast, you don't quite catch it. The inches we need are everywhere around us. They're in every break of the game, every minute, every second. On this team, we fight for that inch. On this team, we tear ourselves and everyone else around us to pieces for that inch. We claw our fingernails for that inch. Because we know when we add up all those inches, that's going to make the fucking difference between winning and losing. Between living and dying. I'll tell you this, in any fight, it's the guy who's willing to die who's going to win that inch. And I know if I'm going to have any life anymore, it's because I'm still willing to fight and die for that inch. Because that's what living is. There's 6 inches in front of your face. Now I can't make you do it. You got to look at the guy next to you. Look into his eyes. Now I think you're going to see a guy who will go that inch with you. You're going to see a guy who will sacrifice himself for this team because he knows when it comes down to it, you're going to do the same for him. That's a team, gentlemen. And either we heal now as a team, or we will die as individuals.
Ideas are bulletproof.
Welcome to the show, ladies and gentlemen. It's another live edition of Down the Rabbit Hole. It is February 24th, 2012. I'm your host, Popeye from FederalJack.com, and it is a pleasure to be joining you all again this evening. My guest tonight is a good friend of mine. He's a friend of the show and a friend of all of you out there. He's a fellow radio show host. He's been a frequent guest on the show before, and he is a fellow researcher and an all-around awesome human being, in my opinion. As far, as long as I've known him, he's been awesome to me, so I have no reason to dislike him. And without further ado, I want to introduce my guest for tonight, my good buddy, Mark Passio. Mark, welcome back to the show.
Popeye, thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here, as always, on Down the Rabbit Hole.
I got to tell you what, man. Even though we kind of run at the same time on Sundays, I constantly plug your show, even on air when you're on. I tell people to go pull your archives because the stuff that you get into on your program and over at your website, What on Earth is Happening. Ladies and gentlemen, you've heard me pimp Mark's site out before, and I'm going to do it again. You got to go to his site, and you got to pull his archives. If you're listening to my show, I'm not going to tell you to go to listen to someone else's, so listen to mine, but go right after my show and pull Mark's archives and then listen to his show because you need to hear what he's talking about. And tonight we're going to get into a few things. Depending on how much time we have, we might get into to more than just the 2 things that I want to focus on. But the first 2 things I want to focus on tonight are mind control and we're going to get into numerology, why they like these dates, why they like numbers. And Mark and I have talked about this before, but I have a lot of new listeners that are listening live that might not have heard the last time Mark was on. And it's good to hear this stuff anyway. It's good to go over it because it reinforces. Sometimes with the amount of information that's out there, you forget because there's just so much. So if you're not into this all the time and you're not researching this type of stuff all the time, you might kind of forget a few things here or there, a little bit of details. So it is good to go over it. Now, in prepping for tonight's show, Mark and I were chatting before we came on air, and he hadn't seen the Grammy performance yet. And I sent him the article from Vigilant Citizen and everything. And Mark, quick take on Nicki Minaj, this new pop star. To me, reeks of Project Monarch and MK Ultra. So since we're going to do mind control and stuff tonight, let's jump right into the pool, and that's the end we're going to jump into is the mind control side first.
Sure.
When you look at that, to me it screams Project Monarch.
It's very possible. Again, I wasn't really familiar with her. This is really the first I'm exposed to this pop star because I don't really follow pop music much, and I don't have any cable television network access in my house. So the only thing the only way that I would see anything like this is by, checking it out on a site and or YouTube or something like that. So I hadn't seen this. I just downloaded the video before the show. I'm going to check it out after the show. But from what I saw, there are very blatant occult trappings displayed on stage in her ritualistic style clothing that she's wearing, dressed all in red, at least prior to the show or coming into the show. And then she's dressed in black on the stage. But priests in robes acting as part of the stage centerpiece as part of this ritual, which seems like a ritual on the stage from the very little that I caught of it. But I'll have to look into it further to give a full analysis to be able to say in any way that it's anything related with, deep occult or monarch or anything like that. So I would reserve my judgment on commenting in relationship to those aspects of it, but it's something I definitely want to look at further, and you could clearly see there is at least some occult symbolism employed.
I agree. If you haven't gotten, and I know you haven't gotten a chance, so I just wanted your raw take. But I agree. If you don't know the full aspect, it's always good to research until you reserve judgment. From what I've seen in my research into her, she's completely monarch material. To the core. This young girl, whoever she was previously to what she is now, is just, you can see, in her videos, you can see in her eyes, she's a robot. It's like she's soulless. And you actually brought up a good point about her last name. Her stage name, the secondary stage name is Minaj. And you said that's part of that means moon or something, right? Like lunar?
An old Phoenician word for moon is min, M-I-N. So they could be relating her to, a form of a lunar goddess of the ancient world. But ménage, in the French language, we know that basically means, like a ménage à trois, three-way or something like that. So there could be sexual overtones to the name as well. But
which is part of their programming. So that would make sense as well.
Immediately upon seeing her name, printed out, the first thing I thought was, well, that starts with the name, one of the names of the goddess in one of the ancient traditions, which was Min.
You see, so there's always some, it's not coincidental that there's always some, even just at looking at it at like a first glance, you can see occult aspects. So when it starts to send up red flags like that, that's what happened to me. Is I don't really pay attention to anything, but I noticed that they were really playing out the Whitney Houston death. I was like, man, something. I know they take advantage of it to hide what they do, but this was just going overboard. So I was like, you know what? Let's see if it's a spectacle like the Michael Jackson one was. So I think it was Saturday or Sunday. They had that. I think it was Saturday. They were doing the live streaming on all the major networks. It was Whitney Houston's funeral, and watching these people sing and perform. At her funeral in the church, some of the people like Tyler Perry. He's one of these comedian morons. He was dressed all in a weird outfit, red and black, almost with like a red, like a kind of like I don't know, like something you would expect. The suit, the outfit that Raiden in the video game Mortal Kombat War, the white outfit. It was that, but in black with a red sash around his waist. It looked just like that. It's the only way I could describe it. It was really strange. And I was like, man, there. And he got up in the middle of, while someone was, singing to her, and he was like putting his arm up and like clapping his hands and stuff. And maybe he was just getting into it. I don't know. I'm just saying it reeked of over the top. So the more I looked into it, that's when I found the Grammy performance and then all the occult weird crap that was going on with Clive Davis and then the stuff Shaka Khan said. In fact, when we come back, because we're going to the break, when we come back, I'll play this clip from Shaka Khan really quick about the music industry being demonic so that everybody can hear it. And, I'll get Mark's take on that, and we'll get into the mind control aspect. I want to explain why we're talking about all that. We are back, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, so like Sunday show with Cherie, if my lips weren't getting stuck together, like on Sunday's show with Cherie, wow, there's a lot of S's in there. No wonder I got tongue-tied. We went over this, and I played a clip that I'm going to play again right now for you guys. And this is Shaka Khan. I'm going to set this up while I'm talking to you. She was talking to, what's his name? Piers Morgan. And she was explaining about the music industry, and she makes an interesting comment. She's talking about Whitney Houston's death, and she makes an interesting comment pertaining to it. And she says that the music industry is demonic. Now, I played this for Mark off air, and I pointed, the reason I played this one clip, part of the clip to him, was because there's something that she says. Now, I'm going to tell you what it is afterwards, but I want you to hear what she says. But there's something she says that's really, really important, because it's the way she phrases something you need to pay attention to.
Highly sensitive people. And this machine around us, this so-called music industry, is such a demonic thing. It sacrifices people's lives and their essences.
Did you hear what she just said?
Sacrifices their lives and their essences. A very distinct choice of words, to say the least.
Now, see, that's why I played that for you off air, Mark. As soon as she said essence, I stopped it and I said, she's talking about the soul. And you picked right up on it. You were like, yeah, man. So I'll give you the floor. Go ahead and explain why that's a very telling comment, knowing what we know, understanding what we understand. Let's try to help the listeners understand why we look at that and we understand that that's such a telling comment. The floor is yours, my friend.
I would particularly think that this is not just an allusion to, the greed inherent in the music industry. She's making a deliberate choice of words here with the words demonic, sacrifice, and essence. I think it's pretty clear that this is a hint, that this is some kind of a wink and a nod to say there's more to this than meets the eye on the surface. And, if you just look at some of the symbolism that they employ in the music industry, if you look at how the occult is infiltrated into this industry at the highest levels, how it the dark occult infiltrates its way into just about every institution that exists on this planet. Certainly it runs the financial industry, the financial institutions. These are some high-level occultists at the top of finance. And of course, entertainment is another huge method for controlling people through distraction and through trivialities. You don't want people to pay attention to things that are really going on of importance. So the entertainment industry as a whole, whether it be movies like Hollywood, whether it be the recording industry, as she referred to it, the music industry, and or whether it be sports, other forms of distraction. This is a very key part of the entire control system, because in order to keep people from looking at the real information that they need to understand to truly become free, instead of looking into the information that they need to look into to understand the methods of mind control that are perpetrated against them on a daily basis, and to steel themselves against those methodologies, to work upon the self, to improve the human psyche so that you're not able to be manipulated according to those methodologies, well, they need to provide tons of distraction and entertainment galore in order to distract people so that they will never look into that information. And it actually works pretty well. It has continued to work up to this point because most people, prefer to remain distracted and entertained as opposed to doing any real hard looking at themselves first and foremost, and hard digging into the truth because, it does take time and attention and effort to do those things, to discover truth and to work upon the self. Most people don't want that burden and they don't want that responsibility. So, it doesn't surprise me a bit that the music industry would be used in that capacity because it's an effective technique that has worked so far. So they're going to continue to use it for those purposes because it continues to work upon the consciousness of the masses that they wish to continue to keep under control. And when we talk about the possibility of different types of mind control being involved in the music industry, yeah, we do need to look at things like Monarch. We do need to look at things like MK Ultra, and these are huge areas of study that we couldn't possibly even cover in one show. MK Ultra, for example, when we talk about Monarch programming, first of all, there's tons of symbolism associated with that. What they're trying to hold back is a transformation in consciousness, and so the symbol of one of the mind control programs, the wider mind control methodology programs, which Monarch is, and this is one of the programs that is very cross-connected with the dark occult, okay, with Satanism and dark Luciferianism. Monarch is actually like an offshoot of MK Ultra. It is a continuation of and refinement of the techniques that were developed during the MK Ultra years. So the first thing you need to do is look into MK Ultra to understand the reality of direct methodologies of mind control that have been attempted. And these are all made available through Freedom of Information Act requests and declassification of government documents. And we still don't even know the depth and scope of MK Ultra. Several thousand pages of information have come forward on it, but more information than has been released has been destroyed regarding what really took place and the breadth of this human experimentation. But in general, MK Ultra is a covert and extremely immoral human experimentation program. And we can get into the doctors that were in it. You got to look into the work of people like Ewan Cameron and Jose Delgado, and Sidney Gottlieb and many others. But they did sleep deprivation. They did sensory deprivation. They exposed people to mind-altering drugs, and I mean without even their knowledge. Just gave them something, didn't tell them what it is. Just to see what would happen, to see what the effects were and how they could be manipulated or controlled in a certain altered state of consciousness. Well, one of the things that it really wasn't anything new as far as knowledge is concerned that stemmed out of this, but has been around for probably thousands of years in dark occult circles, was the knowledge that at some point of stress, of trauma, the mind essentially enacts a defense mechanism which creates a split personality. Okay, it actually splinters a personality. They call this multiple personality disorder or dissociative identity disorder in psychological circles. But in these experimentation programs, it was just referred to as fracturing, okay? And you're compartmentalizing an aspect of the personality. And the reason this happens, again, is because it's a defense mechanism for trauma that is actually built into the human psyche. And we can talk more about that on the other side of the break.
That's perfect. We'll cut it right there. And ladies and gentlemen, this stuff, again, I urge you to take notes and listen. This stuff is the real deal. 9/11 was a massive, traumatic event used to control people's thinking. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back. You probably heard me and Mark talking through Bumper coming in. I was chatting to him about, somebody had asked me in the chat room about what's the scariest thing I'd seen paranormal-wise, and I was just giving the story to Mark really quick. So I guess I'll have to tell you, since you heard me speaking a little bit of it. Really fast, when I was a kid, I knew a kid that one of my friends, we had played with a Ouija board a few times, and we had some really creepy, like, weird stuff happen. And this wasn't like the Parker Brothers Ouija board. This was like an old witch board, which Mark knows what I'm talking about when I say that. This thing came straight out of Salem, and it was like 200 years old. And it had like a wooden planchette. It didn't have the plastic one with the fake, little plastic eye. The eye was hollow. So it was like a real wooden planchette. And the planchette is a little thing that you move around on the board. So I don't remember, some other kid we knew had this thing. I don't know why the hell he had this or how it was in his family. And to think about it, if I think back on it, I don't know why this kid had it. I don't want to make any accusations, but it was a real witch board. So somehow this kid got it. We had a Parker Brothers one that we started off with, and that got, I had to take it away from him because he started to like do it every day by himself. So we took that away, and that's when this other witch board came to play. And things got really bad. His house was like to the point where his mother, who didn't believe in any of this stuff, she was like a God-fearing Christian. She didn't believe in any of this crap. And I shouldn't call it crap, but that's what she would say. I don't believe in any of this crap. Well, by the time this whole ordeal was done, she changed her tune. She was like, I mean, you would literally, we've seen things in the house. She saw a glowing green, like ball of energy floating through the kitchen. No, my mother, who didn't believe in this, even experienced some of this stuff. You pick up the phone in the house, and there would be no dial tone. It would just say, hell. It was so creepy. I'm not kidding. I just don't really recite these stories because people, most people would be like, right. But that's the kind of creepy, weird things that happened at this kid's house. Like, he had to have a priest come in and bless the house and all this. It was real bad. They ended up moving and selling the house. To this day, once in a while, the last time I talked to him a couple of years ago, he would still once in a while drive past the house to take a look at it. And he said it still, when he would drive up the street, it made the hairs on his arms and stuff stand up. So,
and Popeye, you were saying that there was some extreme temperature differentials.
Oh, in the basement, yeah, man. It was like there was one point the last couple of days before we had an incident. Like, he came at me with a butcher knife. This kid was a complete he was a wimp. He wouldn't fight me. You know what I mean? It was one of my friends, and he wouldn't just do that. It was out of character for him, and he came at me with a knife. I had to put him down. And I dropped him, and I was like, dude, I don't, put the knife down because I'm going to hurt you if you come at me. And I kept trying to be nice about it, and he was out of his mind. So it was a little weird, to say the least. But there was temperature differences where he was playing with this witch board in his basement, and that's where his room was. And it was like June, and this is in New Jersey, and it would be like the low 50s, maybe like 48 degrees down there. Like, you could see your breath at times in his basement. And I was like, dude, I don't need to watch horror movies to know that that's a bad sign. That's, you know what I mean?
Summers in New Jersey and the Philadelphia area get really stifling, so that's a big temperature differential.
And this stuff was real enough to the point where the parents who didn't believe in this stuff were like, holy crap. And even they brought in a local priest to like bless his house because there was just some weird things going on. And they had to bring in a local priest because they couldn't go to the Catholic Church. They weren't Catholic, so it's not like you can just call the Catholic Church and be like, I need an exorcism stat, and they fly a team out. It doesn't work like that. So
it's definitely an interesting anecdote. I've never encountered anything like overtly paranormal like that. I have had, it seems to me like the paranormal, as far as the spirit world, seems to pretty much stay away from me. Like I'm some kind of repulsion for that. Like it doesn't seem to ever manifest. I've actually, in the past, not now, but in the past, I have attempted to invoke things with things like Ouija boards, but I've never been able to draw anything out of them. So I don't know whether it's something about my personality or, my aura or whatever that just, doesn't allow them to manifest, in my presence. But the closest thing to a paranormal experience that I've had, and I don't know really what to make of it, whether it is paranormal or it was an actual physical manifestation or not. I had a daylight encounter with a UFO at close range, what I would probably classify or categorize as a close encounter of the second kind, as they call it, which is a close-up encounter with a craft. And I would say, this object that definitely was no conventional aircraft or anything that could be identified as, an Earth derived flying vehicle of any kind, was probably about 200 feet from me in broad daylight. And it definitely blew my mind and freaked me out. But, then it just hovered away and disappeared. It literally disappeared. Like I looked at it 1 second and the next second it was gone. So that's about the strangest thing as far as if you want to consider that in the realm of paranormal that's ever occurred to me.
Yeah, it was, I mean, I have to honestly say, it, I guess we could devote the rest of it. We have a few minutes before we go to break, so we'll devote the rest of this segment to this. That's fine.
Sure. Then we can get back into
we can get back into the
mind control.
Yeah, the whole mind control aspect. But screw it. For the rest of this segment, I'll devote it to this. That's why on the 28th, if you guys remember, on my show, I wasn't live. Mark and I did a special broadcast a couple days earlier, and we aired it that night because I went to a real haunted house to go investigate it. That's. I mean, I was always interested in the paranormal. That's actually how I found conspiracy. My mother got me this book when I was, I don't know, like 10 years old, 10 years old. Mysteries of the Unexplained from Time Life, and I read all the paranormal stuff and the exorcism stuff and all the stuff about it. There was a lot of stuff with Ted Gunderson. I don't know if they mentioned Ted specifically, but some of the things he talked about, like satanic ritual abuse, there's a couple stories about that in there, exorcisms and stuff. And then it talked about, there was a whole section, conspiracy. And that's when I found out about presidential assassinations and the Kennedy assassination and all this other stuff. And my jaw hit the floor. And that's about the time I started investigating the Kennedy assassination and all this other stuff when I was really, really young. That's when I found a lot of this out. I was just like, you know what I mean? But that's kind of what led me down that path, was paranormal, investigating this stuff, because I wanted to see if it was real or not. And then as I got older, investigating paranormal stuff, I experienced some really interesting things, to say the least. And because of that, it led me to research other aspects. Like I met people that were self-proclaimed witches and stuff. And, if you're average Joe and someone comes up to you and they say, I'm a witch, you're like, what? You know what I mean? Like, so I had to actually go research what this stuff was. And the more I researched about it, the more I realized that there was a serious aspect to this. And then I learned the difference between white occult and dark occult, because occult just means hidden. So when you hear occult knowledge, it just means hidden knowledge, ladies and gentlemen. The word occult it's like the term conspiracy, it just has that negative tone to it that people automatically, or they roll their eyes and they go, oh, spooky stuff, whatever. Occult means hidden. So there's good occult and dark occult, meaning it's not really the knowledge, it's just the use of the knowledge that makes it good or evil. The knowledge itself isn't bad.
That's right.
It's not like the hammer isn't bad or the gun. If I use a hammer...
It's how it's used. It's how it's employed.
Exactly. If I take a hammer and smash someone's head in with it, Mark, or I take a gun and I shoot somebody, was it the hammer or the gun that killed people? Or was it me using them as a weapon that did it? Of course, it's answer B.
Consciousness of the wielder that directed that action. And therefore, that's what was good or bad, and that's what imbued it with the intent of the action. So, that's a great point to bring up, and a lot of people will dismiss certain kinds of information just because of, their preconceived notions of what the word occult means. But again, it comes from the same basis as the word ocular, because it has to do with vision, with being able to see something. So ocular and occult come from the same root word in Latin, which is occultare, a Latin verb that means to hide, to conceal, or to keep secret. And that's it. Occult just means kept secret or hidden from sight, not easy to see. And what we're trying to do here, and have been trying to do, is to bring the world of the occult out into the scene, into a place where it can be exposed to the light and seen readily for what it actually is.
I agree, and that's why I do shows like this, and I have you on my show, Mark, because I would consider you somewhat of an expert in all of this. All right, ladies and gentlemen, Mark and I are going to get cut off. Stay tuned, 3 minutes. We will be back. You do not want to go anywhere. Mark and I are back, ladies and gentlemen. And the last segment, and actually the whole pretty much first hour of the show, Mark and I got into the occult. And, even with me telling you that little story, I was able to, get back to the occult a little bit. And it's important that we go over this stuff because, remember, Mark and I are going to get into the whole numerology aspect. And to understand some of this stuff, you have to understand, a little bit of the occult and kind of get a little bit of a grasp of it. Now, when I say occult, I should say the dark occult, because that's what the Illuminati, I'm doing air quotes, the elites, whatever these people you want to call them, that's what they're into. And a huge example of that is the Emmy, or whatever the hell it was, the Grammy Awards, where she did the whole performance. And then you and I were talking about how Madonna did another performance, maybe a week earlier,
at the Super Bowl, right? Yeah,
at the Super Bowl, and it was the same very ritualistic. It was just, I don't even want to call it a display. I honestly, I think I should just call it a ritual, because that's kind of what it looked like to me. And you actually broke it down to me off air. So I'll give you the floor. We got just the final segment of the first hour. We still got a whole nother hour. So what I'll do is I'll give you the last 10 minutes here. Go ahead and break down for the listeners and for me, because I love to hear it again, your view on Madonna's whole performance. And then we can touch on mind control and stuff second hour. We'll explain why we're talking about this.
This one I did get a chance to see, and it clearly had obvious Egyptian overtones. But Madonna herself, again, you're seeing another goddess name as the central figure of the ritual. Okay, so the other pop star, her first name, her last name was Minaj, right? Her first name again was?
Yeah, Nicki Minaj.
Nicki Minaj, okay. So Minaj, again, I as soon as seeing that name, I immediately associated it with the moon goddess's name, Min, okay? Now, Madonna's name is more clearly associated with a goddess, okay? This is associated with Mary, who was the Madonna in the Christian tradition, which is where Madonna's name is taken, derived from. So this is more goddess symbolism, again, as the central figure, if you will, in the ritual. And you'll see over and over again that when they have what they call mega rituals, okay, which are, rituals intended to be played out in the public, out in the open for general consumption, not something that is just privately done for their own aims. This is done to affect consciousness on a larger scale. The goddess symbolism will often be employed. This was done for Princess Diana. Okay, she was ritualistically sacrificed, and her name is Diana, another name of the goddess, this time in the ancient Roman tradition. So you're seeing a pattern repeat itself. A ritual for mass consumption playing out on a mass stage, okay, and having the central figure as the goddess, who is often depicted in a distress or in some situation involving sacrifice. And in Princess Diana's case, it was real life sacrifice, okay? But if you look at the Madonna symbolism and all this Egyptian symbolism, it's clearly a blending or a merging of both solar and lunar symbolism involved in this particular performance. She's wearing a headdress that looks like the golden falcon Horus, this hawk god of ancient Egypt, who was, he was the sun. Okay, he was the solar savior god, and it represented male energies. And at the same time, since she is the goddess who gives birth to this solar deity as the moon, okay, so the goddess is always associated with the moon in some form. In the Egyptian tradition, this was Isis, and in certain later Egyptian traditions, her name was Hathor. So I would say that Madonna in this ritual plays the role both of Horus and Isis/Hathor, and this is clearly seen in the ritual dress, particularly the headdress that she's wearing in this performance. And you'd have to take a look at the video to see what I'm talking about, or take a look at a picture of how she was dressed to understand that. So that's what I'll say about that particular performance. And it definitely has occult overtones as well. But clearly goddess symbolism is employed, and clearly this dichotomy between solar and lunar symbolism is employed. Other than that, what it's doing is basically getting people to basically identify with authority in general, which plays a big role in the performance, with these centurions all gathering around this, pharaonic style, I guess you could say, solar-lunar combination that Madonna represents. And they're trying to incorporate sexuality in with the idea of subservience and the idea of serving the state. Okay, these are like the minions of the state, all of her henchmen around her, serving the pharaoh. And they're always mixing in sexuality into that equation to get you to identify with it as something that is pleasurable, sensual, and desirable. So that's where they're going psychologically.
Sex is actually used as a subliminal constantly, whether it's images of penises or even vaginas, and there's usually even the word sex, S-E-X. It does not matter. I mean, I've seen it. Just Google. I'm trying to remember the name of the video as I talk here. I just Google subliminal or whatever search engine you want. Go on YouTube and look up subliminals, like in everything or something like that, or hidden subliminal messages everywhere. It should bring it up. And you'll see this video. It's like 10 minutes long. And you'll see how many times they use the word sex in movies, right, in cartoons. You know, the Little Mermaid, the guy that was marrying the two of them had a boner. It's right there in your face. You know, the Lion King, when he lays down, he's on a cliff and he lays down and he like knocks up dust and pollen and stuff, and it goes up in the air. If you slow it down and you freeze frame it at the right spot, you can see it spells out the word sex, the dust that goes up in the air. Which
I'm sure is clearly a deliberate subliminal interjected into there.
Of course. That's not, I mean, look who made the movie, Disney, the kings of mind control. And we'll touch on that again, I promise. We'll get back into the mind control aspect in hour number 2, and we'll talk about why these certain dates and numbers are important.
Do I have time to bring up 2 small aspects?
Yeah, go ahead. We got about like 3 minutes. Go ahead.
Great. The first thing I want to let everyone know is when it comes to the Hollywood interpretations of different occult trappings and symbolism and how this is being used in Hollywood, I'm probably not the foremost expert, mainly because I don't as much pay attention to what goes on in Hollywood and pop culture as some other individuals who their focus is looking at how this is employed in that aspect. I'm kind of like a purist when it comes to studying the occult from original traditions and source texts. So, that I just wanted to caveat what I'm saying to this, that, my interpretation is not the be all and end all of it. And, there are probably some other researchers that have looked into the way that this is employed in Hollywood, probably even much more so than myself. For example, Freeman Fly or Lennon Honor or other people this has been one of the main focuses of their work, is to look into how this is actually employed when it comes to popular cultural icons. So that's one. The other thing I wanted to say is, to anyone who just openly dismisses the occult on its face just says, well, this isn't part of my belief system or my the way I see reality at all, and therefore I'm going to completely dismiss it. One of the things I always tell people, and I use an analogy to display this, is what you believe is largely irrelevant when it comes to something having influence or affecting your life. And people will say, well, they think it's just the opposite. If I don't believe in it, if I don't, if that doesn't enter my belief system or my worldview at all, it can't have any power or effect over me. And nothing could be farther from the truth. See, if enough other individuals in the world, okay, are working operationally with a certain belief structure, within a certain set of beliefs, and they're acting upon those beliefs, they are going to have an effect or an impact on your life and the circumstances surrounding your experience, regardless of what you believe. So your belief is not required. What we're talking about here is beliefs that other people have that they're acting upon. So I always give the example for people who can't just grasp it by it being said like that is, think of extreme radical right-wing fundamentalist Christians, okay? And how, let's say, they're so anti-abortion that they're willing to do violence preemptively to stop an abortion. So they'll take some weaponry and shoot up an abortion clinic. Well, if you happen to be in the vicinity of that abortion clinic, whether you knew anything about fundamentalist, radical right-wing Christianity, believed in it or not, that can affect your world. That can affect your life of those actions because other people believed in it strongly enough and were willing to act upon.
Wow, that's actually a very powerful example. That's actually really good, Mark. We are back with hour number 2 here on this Friday edition of Down the Rabbit Hole. It is February 24th, 2012. I am your host, Popeye from federaljack.com. Make sure you check my website out. It's always got information about what I talk about on air. Trust me, it's a huge archive. It goes back to 2006. So I urge you, take the time whenever it's there for your perusing at your convenience. Tonight I'm joined by my good friend, Mark Passio. And Mark and I, the first hour, went over occult, the dark occult a little bit. We covered some of the symbolism that's been in your face recently. And we did this, and we also talked about some pop stars. Now, the reason we did all this is because it's all connected. Now, I promised we would get into the mind control aspect. And now is how I'm going to show you, and as well as Mark, how it's all connected to what we talked about in the first hour. Why did we talk about these dumb pop stars doing stupid things on stage at the Super Bowl? Well, because they're doing it for a reason, as Mark explained. Okay, so we showed you the occult aspect of it, or the dark occult aspect of it. Now, how does mind control fit into that? Well, it fits in like this. You need people to do things like that for you. Some people, probably, most people have a decent soul, or have a soul to begin with, and they have some humanity in them, and they wouldn't do that. They wouldn't do, maybe the types of things that they need them to partake in. So they have mind-controlled little robots. Of course, they're used for other things, too. I urge you all to read Kathy O'Brien's book all the time, The Transformation of America, and Bryce Taylor's book, Thanks for the Memories. After you read those two books, you're not going to sleep well at night for about a week or two. Trust me, it'll turn your stomach, the stuff you're going to read, especially in Kathy's book. But you got to read it. You got to understand what these people do. So they create these pop stars to perform these rituals because these rituals, the ritual itself and the effect, as Mark was explaining the first hour, are more important than the person themselves, that they're that they're pretty much sacrificing this little mind controlled robot. And you heard what Shaka Khan said. She said that the music industry takes their essence, it steals their soul. So they become a mindless robot. And look at Lady Gaga and Madonna. Madonna still kind of has a brain. I think she knows what's going on and she's down with it. So I don't think she has to be controlled as much maybe as other ones. But you can see with Gaga and this new girl Nicki Minaj and the rest of them, they're all through at one level or another controlled. Same thing with Britney Spears and them. It's all, and where did a lot of them come from? The Mickey Mouse Club. Somebody asked in the chat room earlier, is Disney really that evil? Was Walt Disney in on this? Oh, he was most certainly in on it. The FBI actually asked him to partake in this and do this stuff and put the subliminals inside his movies and do all this stuff and push the sex and push the brainwashing and all this other stuff. I mean, this is so deep, Mark and I couldn't explain every aspect of it in a 10-hour show. You have to read and do the research. So, as always, I urge you to do your own research when him and I are not on air, and go look up what we're talking about. We'll give you the references. I promise you, before the end of the show, we'll tell you where you need to go.
I'd also recommend Fritz Springmeier's work, particularly his book, How to Create an Undetectable Mind Control Slave. His work regarding monarch programming is also excellent. I'd also encourage people to look into the work of Joseph P. Farrell, who talks about Nazis and their connection to some mind control experimentation. Of course, one of the origins of the MK Ultra experimentation that went on here in the United States in the 1950s through the 70s, and arguably that's continuing right up to the present day. I would say it most certainly is. You have to look into Joseph Mengele and the experimentation that he did on the concentration camp prisoners at Auschwitz. So I would say that his research there, if you want to even call it that, his horrific experimentation there paved the way for some of the work that was done by other doctors and scientists as part of MK Ultra, which, spanned many institutions, not just science and psychology, but it went into our educational system at universities. It went into the prison system.
There's Army veterans that are still alive, Mark, that are suing the Pentagon and the CIA right now, and the government et al. For having implants put in them and stuff, and trying to train them as like psychological super soldiers and all this other crap. Remember, they say that didn't happen though, but you actually have guys coming forward and saying, "Hey, we can prove that we partook in this stuff," and they tried to make implant us and stuff. I mean, people, this already happened. It's not like this happened a week or two ago. This happened in the 60s and in the 50s. Remember, they were lacing people's coffee, Mark, at the CIA?
Tons of things that they did surreptitiously without informing the public. They sprayed drugs out through car exhaust vents just to see what would happen if they dispersed drugs on a wide, like an aerosol on a wide basis to the public, just to see what the kind of reaction would be, without informing anybody about that. They have sprayed populations from aerosol equipped airplanes on entire populations just to see what would be the result. It's unbelievable that these individuals think that they have rights that do not exist to experiment on other people without their consent, and that they just own people like that, like cattle, and that is their mindset. What I'd like to do before even going further into the mind control techniques is to delineate and just make a distinguishment between forms of what I call, and many other researchers have called, soft mind control methodologies, and what would be called hard mind control, or attempts to directly control the behavior, because it's important that listeners have an understanding of the difference between these two things. Soft mind control, or methodologies of manipulation, involve psychological conditioning, and direct obfuscation and divide and conquer techniques and strategies in order to manipulate people into a certain worldview, in order to get them thinking along certain lines, so therefore their behavior will be patterned after their thoughts. This is what I have covered extensively on my radio show for over a year and a half. I went through these what are considered manipulation methodologies or soft mind control techniques, because these are the things that are being employed on the biggest scale. Okay, these are intended for mass consumption by the population, and their actions become controllable because these indirect mind control techniques work upon their psyche and therefore determine their behavioral characteristics and ultimately their actions. And so it's going to determine the external reality that we all experience, because our external reality is dictated by the quality of our actions. And therefore, if the mind can be manipulated into performing certain actions and behaviors, a certain end result will happen in the physical world. That's soft mind control. Hard mind control, which is what MK Ultra was about, what Monarch is about actually taking over the personality, okay? Literally programming somebody like a computer such that they do not have any control over their actions, and that their actions can be literally dictated. And this is possible. It has been known about for thousands of years, actually. In the modern world, like I said, you need to go back and look at some of the dastardly work of Joseph Mengele, the Angel of Death at Auschwitz, to understand where we're patterning the work that we did, the CIA did, as part of MK Ultra. When German scientists, after
the Project Paperclip,
right,
we brought them over. I got to cut you off, Mark, because we got the break sneaking up on us.
Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is all factual and documented what Mark's talking about. Go look up Project Paperclip. We brought all these mind control scientists over. It's disgusting. We'll be right back. Ladies and gentlemen, I urge you to do research on the mind control aspect of things yourself, because there is never enough time. Like I said, 10 hours, Mark and I could go on. But look up Project Monarch. MK Ultra you can look up, but that's an umbrella name to cover all these different projects. Like Project Monarch is one thing. They have all this other stuff that they've done. And it's not just, mind control people to perform rituals. Those girls and even guys are used for other things too. They usually use them as sex slaves, drug mules. If you read Kathy O'Brien's book, you'll find out a lot of interesting facts about the country music
something
industry.
Akin to a messenger pigeon, even.
Well, they call it the freedom train, they call it, right? The mind control slaves, the whole bunch of them.
One of the terms used, yeah.
They call it the freedom train, I think was one of the names that Kathy O'Brien called it.
You're right that it's like an umbrella, because there were tons of other projects like Artichoke, Bluebird, MK Delta, you name it. I mean, they had
Artichoke's the one that those guys are suing.
MK Naomi is another one.
Yeah, Artichoke's the one where those guys are suing. So see, that's two of them right there that you can verify right there. Artichoke and Monarch. And then go look up all the others Mark listed. In fact, Mark, go ahead and list them one more time again.
There was obviously MK Ultra. There was, Monarch is like, again, a occult derivative of this body of research that is about hard mind control. That's definitely connected in with dark occultism. But then there was Artichoke, there was Bluebird, there was MK Delta, there was MK Naomi, there was Project Pandora, and many others. It's an extensive body of research. I mean, like I said, you just have to really search out the material and then just start reading. I highly recommend, as a very beginning primer work, Jim Keith's work on mind control called, I'm trying to think, Mass Control is the name of the book by Jim Keith. The subtitle of the book is called Engineering Human Consciousness. So Jim Keith's work, Mass Control, Engineering Human Consciousness, is absolutely indispensable. But to go back to, talking about the origins of some of this, at least in the modern world, because these techniques, as I've said, are ancient and have been known about for thousands of years through dark occult mystery schools. You definitely want to look at the SS's work in the Third Reich, particularly Mengele's work at the Auschwitz concentration camp, when a ton of Nazi scientists were brought over to the United States through Project Paperclip, which is another thing people really need to understand what happened in Paperclip post-World War II. The research of the Nazi scientists was continued as part of MK Ultra, and this was all done ostensibly because of the Cold War and because of the Korean War, and people making the claim that the Koreans were using torture techniques against our soldiers, and so we had to understand how this worked so that we could do the same thing, etc., or protect our soldiers against it somehow. This was all done to really find ways of directly controlling the human mind and ultimately human behavior. Let's cut to the chase and, put that right out there on the table. This wasn't a defensive strategy.
Yeah, let's cut through the bullshit, because that's a lie.
Right. This was an offensive strategy done against human consciousness. This was done as a war on you, as a war on the people of Earth. That's why this was waged. These people want to understand how to control people like a robot, to take their free will away, and ultimately to take their soul from them. That's why this is being done, in a nutshell, to put it very bluntly. But, not to belabor the topic, because I want to get to numerology too, but I want to put people onto a few names of scientists, doctors, to research and understand their hideous work that they did as part of these projects. One of them is George Estabrooks, who worked directly with hypnosis and this technique of fracturing, this technique of multiple personalities being created. And again, this is a defense mechanism. I was alluding to this earlier, but I want people to understand there's a defense mechanism in the human psyche that prevents people from reliving extreme trauma, So if you can hold someone in a condition of extreme trauma for an extended period of time, the mind will enact this defense mechanism, And they call it fracturing or creating an altar. In occult circles, this is called the altar, because you are altering the personality. And it's like breaking a mirror, and there's fragments of the mirror that once was a united whole, a united mind, but the psyche is now broken into shards or pieces, and each one of them is separate from each other and can be individually programmed. It's like water in an ice cube tray is another way, an analogy I use, There's different components separating the water, but it's all within the same tray, This is what happens to the mind when trauma-based mind control is being done. So you're subjecting the person to different types of techniques to invoke this defense mechanism. Some of them are just direct physical torture, confinement in small confined spaces, like a very, very, very small room, or even a cage, or a box, tying people up, subjecting them to like waterboarding or near drowning, a light being used as a weapon against them, like extreme light in the eyes, being hung in certain positions from limbs, compression with weights. Electric shock is a huge one, using electricity on them. We can go on and on. It's unbelievable. Drugs, surreptitious use of drugs to disorient, put someone in a dissociated state. Again, it can get more and more macabre as you explore the hideousness of the different techniques that are employed. And these people doing this obviously have no conscience. These are psychopathic individuals, that again, they look at people as animals, as cattle, and they have absolutely no compassion, absolutely no concern over the repercussions of their actions toward these people. It's all about their research, their methods, and enacting their control that they want to see done, getting their, quote, results. And that's all it's about. So, these techniques, what they're used to do is keep someone in a traumatic state until this defense mechanism of fracturing happens, and then the psyche breaks into multiple personalities, and it does this so one of the personalities will actually experience the trauma, but another one will not experience it. So that the consciousness will hide in this split, altered personality, so that it isn't directly experiencing the trauma. There's another part of the personality that directly experiences the trauma. So the person after the event, will not really be able to remember a lot of the actual torture or the actual traumatic event. Like a car accident, for example, is one of the places where this natural defense mechanism will occur. If you are in a traumatic car accident, sometimes there's a fracturing that takes place and there's an amnesic reaction that actually occurs where you can't quite remember the events leading up to the accident, just prior to it. You can't remember what happened during it or just after. This is done so you won't keep reliving the event in your mind and having a physiological reaction to the reliving of the event.
Yeah, trauma-based mind control, compartmentalization. Like I said, that's what 9/11 was useful for, ladies and gentlemen. And Mark and I are going to get into the numerology aspect, and that's why I keep bringing 9/11 up. So we're going to get into that in a few minutes, so stay tuned. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back. Now, we've been going over the occult aspect of things, just barely. Again, you need to research stuff. And the final segment, I'm going to give Mark a few minutes to rattle off all the websites he'd like to plug and tell you all where to go, where you can research the things we've been talking about tonight. You can also go check out my broadcast with him from the 28th. It's on any of my YouTube channels, Federal Jack Tube 6. Actually, the best one to go to is my archive channel. In fact, I think I just uploaded it to that channel too. Check out DTRH Radio Archives, all one word, DTRH Radio Archives, all one word, on YouTube. And that's the new archive channel I built specifically just for all the radio shows, and I've been throwing them up there. And I did put I did upload the show from the 28th there so you guys could hear it, and go listen to it. It's an incredible 2.5 hour show. Mark and I got into this stuff really, really heavily, but we obviously, even 2 hours isn't enough time. I would need a 5 or 6 hour show just to be able to skim the surface correctly. So I urge you to go research, and Mark and I will give you all the resources to do so. But without wasting any more time, Mark, the numerology aspect of things, they always pick certain days and everything. We talked about that in the last time we did that special broadcast, and you went heavily in detail about a lot of the different rituals and everything else. In case anybody's wondering, it's October 28th, 2011 was the show date. So you can find it on YouTube. Just look up Down the Rabbit Hole with Popeye 10/28/2011, and it'll come up. You'll see it say Popeye and Mark Passio. So getting back into it, Mark, the numerology aspect, the way they do things, there's certain numbers. And when you look at 9/11, a lot of these numbers pop up. So we can use kind of the 9/11 explanation to explain a little bit about these numbers. So let's go.
This was a trauma-based mind control ritual in and of itself.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's what I was saying when we were going to the last break. That's exactly what it was.
What I call this is a borderline aspect of mind control. While it isn't soft mind control, it isn't direct hard mind control. It's what I would call mass trauma-based mind control, which is kind of a borderline between the manipulation tactics, which is what it's used to instill in the mind. That's what it's used for, okay, to manipulate people into thinking a certain way about the event. But it also was the mechanism of this method was trauma, was reliving the event over and over and over and over through the images that were replayed constantly in the media for weeks. So that traumatized the minds of people so that they were ready to accept the solution in the form of things like the Patriot Act, the Defense Authorization Act, the Military Commissions Act, et cetera. All the subsequent complete transgressions of human freedom that took place following the 9/11 mega ritual event. So, if you want to look at some of the numerology, the first prerequisite for this is understanding occult numerology in general. There's a term for it known as gematria. So this is something you could look up and become familiar with. I'll spell it. It's Gematria. And occultists are generally obsessed with numerology. And this is because they're very mathematical, they're very left-brained, and they're very ritualistic. Okay, and I'm talking about dark occultists. Now, again, not all occult is the same thing, but the dark occult are very reptilian in the way that they proceed because they're operating from the reptilian mind, okay, the lower portions of the brain, the R complex, okay, the fight or flight response, the desire to control, etc. And numbers provide a structural exact, I guess you could say, repetitiveness or repeatability is the word I'm looking for. Something that provides a repeatable, definitive structure for them, which they love. They don't like surprises. They like ritual. They like things being repetitious and being the way that they are and continue to be that way. That's why they want to keep things the way that they are and the way that they have been going for them. They don't want change, okay? That's what they fear above all else. So numbers are a great aspect or avenue for this type of consciousness. So there's two numbers that you could proceed from. I would say actually there's three numbers to understand and proceed from there. Okay, and these are triple digit numbers. Okay, now the first thing I want to say about this is, again, inherently, these attributions aren't in the numbers. That's the first thing. If you're thinking about it from that left brain perspective, you're not going to get occult numerology at all. You're going to constantly be approaching it from a left brain understanding, which is saying, oh, well, that's just a number. That's just a number. Okay. What we're talking about is the associations and correspondences that are ascribed to the numbers because of certain qualities or connections that are made to the numbers, okay? And then that becomes a belief system. So what I'm explaining is the belief system. And it doesn't matter whether you believe the same thing about these number sets. I'm telling you that this is how they're viewed in the occult by other occultists, okay? This is the meaning that they have attributed to some of these numbers. So if you start with these three numbers, okay, these three triple-digit numbers, and try to understand what is meant by these numbers, the underlying meaning of them, you can proceed from there, okay, to understand the numbers of the 9/11 event. The first is 666, which is obviously a very popular and known piece of numerology when it comes to the occult. It's considered the devil's number, Satan's number, etc. Okay? There's a reason for this, but you can't really understand the reason until you consider it in conjunction with two other numbers. And they are 777 and 888. Okay, so here's the three numbers you're going to start the study of occult numerology or gematria with: 666, 777, and 888. Okay, 888 has been traditionally used in occult numerology to represent the divine. Okay, God, if you will, the all, because it's three infinities. Okay, an 8 is essentially an infinity symbol, okay, something that loops back upon itself and continues forever in that progression, in that cyclical progression, like an infinity symbol. And 3 is a divine number. That's why these are all triple-digit numbers. They're representing a divine aspect or quality, okay? And they're all centered around that middle number between these two numbers. The 666 is at the bottom, 888 at the top, and then look at 777 in the middle. That's the dividing line between these other two numbers, okay? 666 represents beast consciousness, okay? It represents specifically man in beast consciousness, okay? So the dark influences, the lower animalistic qualities reigning, okay? Consciousness being base or low, all right? Thought, emotion, and action in a state of incompleteness, okay? In ignorance, apathy, laziness, and cowardice. These are the aspects of consciousness unused, undeveloped, incomplete, inactive. That's what that number represents. Now, is that actually the qualities of those numbers? Is that, inherently, does the putting those three numbers mean that? No. It's something that has been ascribed to them in certain occult numerological systems of belief. Okay? And again, other people are using these numbers in that capacity. Whether you believe it or not, again, is irrelevant. It's understanding what they believe. Okay? The number 777 is man, okay, in between the beast form of consciousness and divinity, okay? It is man embodying or imbuing the qualities of the divine within himself, okay? But of course not being the divine. It's what, in the words of the New Testament, what Jesus would have described as being in the world but not of it. Okay, so this is man in a state of unity consciousness, where man has unified his thoughts, his emotions, and his actions and brought them into a state of harmony and unison with each other, such that he thinks, feels, and acts as one. There is no contradiction between any of those three modalities of consciousness as you and will, develop the willpower. All right, so thought, emotion, and action are unified. They're active, and for all intents and purposes, they are completed. They have reached their state of fruition. Okay? So this is man, okay, in a state resembling the qualities of the divine, not being God, for example, but resembling the qualities of the divine, being in the world but not of it, being God-like. Okay? And in this opposite state, okay, he is the 666, the beast, embodying the consciousness of base modalities of consciousness, okay? Embodying beast consciousness, in other words. So that's why it's the number of the beast. Now, in gematria, you reduce by adding, okay? It sounds like a contradiction in terms, but essentially you're trying to get down to a single-digit number. So 666 can be, quote, reduced by adding the three sixes together. So 6 plus 6 is 12, plus another 6 is 18. So 6 plus 6 plus 6 is 18. So in order to reduce the three sixes, we're adding them together to get 18, and then we're going to reduce the 1 and the 8, the two numbers in 18. 1 plus 8 is 9. So what you could say in gematria, 6 is that 666 reduces to 9 as a single digit. Okay, so 9 and 666 in numerological terms mean the same thing. All right, so we do the same thing for 777. 7 plus 7 is 14, plus 7 is 21. 2 plus 1 is 3. So 777 in occultic numerology or gematria reduces to 3. So now you have two other numbers that we could look at in conjunction with 666 and 777, understanding what those two states of man's consciousness are represented by these numbers, okay? 666, man in base or beast consciousness, reduces to 9. So 9 is also the number of man in egoic consciousness. 3, which is what 777 reduces to, would correspond to man in unity consciousness, okay? So another occult number in gematria and in occult numerological systems is 93. You're putting these two numbers together, okay? The 9 and the 3. which is putting 666 and 777 together. But the reason this is done is because it's showing the pathway of ascension from the 9 to the 3. Man begins in a state of incompleteness as the 9 in base consciousness and proceeds in the evolutionary progress in consciousness to the Trinity consciousness, thought, emotion, and action being complete or unified, okay? Embodying godlike qualities, okay? Being in the world but not of it, etc. So 93 has become the number representing this transformation in consciousness in these occult numerological systems. Okay, it represents ascension, evolution in consciousness, evolution in willpower and thought and care and love, etc. All of these things. 93 represents this upward evolutionary progression or ascension. Okay, so these three numbers, 666, 777, 93. Okay, and you could say, of course, 888. You're looking at that in conjunction with these other two, and 9 and 3 individually you're looking at as correlations of 666 and 777 respectively. But these three numbers are the key. 666, 777, and 93 are the key numbers in occult numerology to understand how some occultists are working with these numbers when it comes to ritualistic behavior. Okay, now there's a reason 9 is also specifically chosen as the characteristics of ego or base consciousness, because it exhibits two very specific principles, an additive principle and a multiplicative principle, okay? When you add 9 to any number, when you reduce the result, okay, you always come back to the same number that you added 9 to. So, for example, you start at 1, you add 9, you get 10. 1 plus 0 is 1. You're back to where you started, 1. You start at 2, you add 9, you get 11. 1 plus 1 is 2. You're back to where you started. You do this with any number. You add 9 to it, you go back to where you started. And this is because if you add base consciousness, which is what 9 represents, you don't change anything. No value is added. No value is changed. So it's like adding a 0, because ego changes nothing. Base consciousness changes nothing. That's why they want to keep us in it. They don't want anything to change for the better. They want to stay in control, okay? So it's the symbol of what the number mathematically represents that's important, and why these numbers are chosen and used in these capacities. When you multiply 9 times anything, this is the other quality of 9. The result that you get will always add to 9. So 9 times 4, for example, is 36. 3 plus 6 is 9. 9 times 8 is 72. 7 plus 2 is 9. 9 times 3 is 27. 2 plus 7 is 9. Any number times 9, the resultant numbers will add to 9. So this is, again, 9 is the number of ego and base consciousness. Whenever you multiply it into anything, only more of itself is created. That's what ego is. It only wants to make more of itself. Okay? So that's why it's Satan's number. And Anton LaVey, the high priest of the Church of Satan, admitted that in his book, The Satanic Rituals. 9 is Satan's number. And he tried to dissociate it with 666 and say that's not really Satan's number, 9 is, but he didn't volunteer the information in that book that when you reduce 666 according to occult gematria, you end up with 9. They're equivalents in occult gematria or numerology. Okay? So when we look at 93, this is the flight that allegedly crashed in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. Okay, this is one of the flight numbers. Another flight number on 9/11 was 77. That's 1 7 short of 777. And that represents something. Another one was 11, was another flight number, and another was 175. So we have to look at all these numbers to understand what they mean in occult terms, because every one of the plain numbers that allegedly hit all of these buildings, okay, or went down in Pennsylvania, are given occultically significant numerological numbers. Okay, in occult numerology, these are extremely occultically significant numbers. Okay, 93, we've already looked at what it represents. Okay, it is ascension out of ego and duality to a higher state of consciousness, to unity consciousness, will, love, etc. Okay, now 93 is 777. It's the same thing. Because 9 plus 3 is 12. 1 plus 2 is 3. 777 adds to 21. 2 plus 1 is 3. So 777 and 93 are the same. And this only makes sense because adding 9 to anything doesn't change the result. So you could just drop it away if you want to reduce. 93 reduces to 3. Just drop the 9 away. Whenever you see a 9, to reduce it, just eliminate it. To reduce the totality of the number that 9 happens to be in, you just get rid of the 9. It's like adding a 0, as we've already seen. Okay, so 777 is another flight number that allegedly went into the Pentagon, and this is 2 of the 3 sevens. Okay, so fractionally we're looking at 14 out of 21 when we compare it to 777. So this is the number in the occult of sorcery. The sorcerer's number is 77 because he has completed intelligence, okay, activated intelligence and activated willpower, but no conscience, no heart, no care. So thought and action are activated, but emotion is not. It's absent. That's why it's the number of sorcery. Okay, and 14 out of 21, which is what 77 out of 777 reduces to, will give you 2/3. And if we take that in decimal form, it's 666. So 77 is like saying 666 in a form of numerology, whereas 93 is like saying 777. These are interchangeable when it comes to their numerological significances. So 11 is a signaling number. This is the first plane that began the ritual, the mega ritual of 9/11. Okay, it's used when occultists are signaling to each other, hey, this is us doing this. 11 is often used because it's a number of synthesis between opposing forces or dualities. Okay, it's the synthesis that gets created as a result of 2 opposing forces coming together. So it's problem, reaction, solution. Okay, it's the Hegelian dialectic. 2 opposing forces come together to create a predetermined outcome. All right, so this is a number representing chaos magic in many cases. Okay, it's a duality number, and that's what this was all ultimately done for, to create division and duality between groups of people throughout the world. Now, the number that will probably be the least recognized, even by some occultists, as being a significant occult number employed on 9/11 is Flight 175. But this is definitely a very occult number, but it's just kind of hidden, okay? Because I think that they would have preferred to use the flight number 418, but to me, that would have made it so over the top recognizable, even by amateur occultists, that people would have probably said, oh, that this is too coincidental. So they used an equivalent, which is 175, okay? So 175 reduces to 13. 1 plus 7 plus 5 is 13. This is equivalent to the number 418, which is a significant occult number, okay? 4 plus 1 plus 8 also equals 13, so it's equivalent to 175. Now, this number is the number of manifestation, the word of manifestation in certain occult systems, okay? So, in general, what it represents is a magic working or a ritualized working. That's what 175 or 418 would represent. So, in other words, 11 started the ritual. That was the number of the plane that hit the North Tower, okay, which was hit first. That's the signaling number. They're announcing this is a ritual, okay? This is us doing it, dark occultists, okay? A chaos number is what it represents, duality. Okay. Then 175 hit the South Tower, and that's when everybody became aware, okay, that this was a, quote, terrorist event, that this was deliberate, okay? And 175 represents, again, it's indicative of a magical work or a ritual work. And that's what this event was all about. It was a mass ritual played out in public. Now, the other significant thing to understand is just the number 9/11, right, reduces to 92. You add the ones together and you get a 9 and a 2, which ultimately reduces to 11, duality, which again was what the whole thing was about. And that's why it's one short of 93. You haven't made it to unity consciousness. You remain in duality. Okay?
Mark, I'm going to have to cut you off because we're just completely out of time. But where can people go? You get about 30 seconds. Where can people go to continue their journey into what you've been talking about? Give them your website and any other stuff you want to give out. Go ahead.
I'm going to throw out some names real quick. Kathy O'Brien, Bryce Taylor, Jim Keith, Fritz Springmeyer, Joseph P. Farrell, John DeCamp. Look up the book, The Franklin Cover-Up. Michael Tessarion. Check out my website, whatonearthishappening.com. I do a live radio show every Sunday on Oracle Broadcasting from 5 to 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Thanks so much, Popeye.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are out of time. But I urge you to look up everything that we discussed tonight. I urge you to look up everybody that Mark just named. Educate yourself. Go to Mark's site, What on Earth is Happening. Go to federaljack.com. I'll see you again on Sunday. Thank you for listening. I'm out.